that this kind of snippet of a psalm has some language that we might kind of have a embodied reaction to, right? That we don't often use the word sin, and we for sure don't often use the word iniquity in this particular sanctuary very often. And so I'm curious, like, how did it land with you as you were listening to that section of the psalm? Sounded strange. Yeah, it's not language we use super often, right? How else? Lots of agony. Yeah. Other thoughts, just kind of as you were hearing it go by, like what stuck with you? Deborah. Oh yeah, the nuns at a convent doing the mea culpa. My fault, right? Yeah. What do we know about the Psalms? They're songs, right? Yeah, there's 150 of them, and it's not dissimilar to a hymnal, right? That these are songs that people sing together, right? Or they would sing in private practice, right? You have songs of communal lament, so it's using us and we language. So when things were going really poorly for the Israelites, like these are when these songs kind of came up and out. And then you have songs of individual lament, where they're naming a lot of personal grief and agony. So thank you for using that word, because I don't know that I would have, but you're exactly right. It is like the psalmist is coming from a place of feeling just like absolutely crushed, like cannot do it anymore, right? And I need us to understand that everything that people say about God is not necessarily what is true about God's self, right? So what we attribute to God doing to us is not necessarily how God actually is, right? This is where the human part of religion really comes in. As we are trying to make sense of our own suffering, sometimes we attribute a lot of our internal experience to God acting upon us. And the feeling is real, right? Like, how many times have, you had just like the worst week ever and you're like, I gotta be cursed. Right? Like something has gone wrong, right? Like when one thing after another keeps happening and you're just like, what is it that the universe is picking on me right now? Right? So we don't often say like God must hate me, right? Like but when you say things like the universe is picking on me, that's that same kind of feeling where it's like I can't make sense of why everything is coming apart at the seams. And so I'm going to put it on something bigger than me, that there is a pattern here happening that I don't understand, but that someone who has power outside of me is doing something to me. So it's a very real human experience, right? When just things are just not going right. But that doesn't mean that that's what's true about God. We may feel separation from God, and the Israelites had a really strong theology of if you were not in right relationship with God, bad things would happen to you, that it was a very like this equals that, if and then statement. So this person is writing out of their theological understanding when they say, God's hand is against me, right? It's a very real feeling of agony and isolation and loneliness that makes them just kind of like want to curl up and inward, right? Like that there's this sense of self-protection, like that I can't share of myself, but that becomes so unbearable, right? There's that idea of like feeling it in their bones that if they didn't bring their truth to speech, if they didn't talk about the things that they were holding so closely, that it would absolutely crush them on their body, like in a bodily way, right? And when we think about our burdens, right? We have an opportunity every week to share our joys and our concerns. What we're talking about is exactly what that psalmist is talking about. That I cannot carry this physically anymore. My guilt, my shame, whatever it is that is keeping me away from all of you and trusting relationship. And I have to bring my pain to speech. If you think about what happens when you have a secret, right? There is this sort of, I've got to circle up and protect it feeling that happens, right? When you've done something that isn't kind of in your integrity, there is like your body may feel kind of like you're kind of curving around it, right? That there is a sort of sense of, I have to guard this because there's this feeling that if someone found out about it, I would not have my place in community. I would not have your trust or your regard, right? Like there's this feeling that like I can't share that because people will look at me differently, right? And it becomes really self-protective. That's exactly what the psalmist is talking about. Like they're suffering, right? And they have this sense of feeling of guilt and shame, and they are holding on to it for dear life. Because if they let it go, they don't know what would happen, but it feels too big to share, too much, that they didn't trust the relationship that they had with God, the relationship they had with their community to be able to hold the weight of the mistake that they made. That's a real human experience, right? And really isolating. If you think of any time that you have felt guilt or shame, right, it keeps you apart from people. Right? You have the mask on, right? That everything's okay, everything's fine, but secretly, inwardly, you've got the terrified gerbil just like running, like freaking out because if someone found out, right? And there's all this energy that goes into people not finding out, right? In 12-step rooms, we have a phrase that you are as sick as your secrets. And this is what this psalm is about. That feeling of being isolated from community, of feeling so lonely and alone, and then making the decision, whether or not it is to another person or just in a life of prayer to God, pouring it out, putting it down, and saying, I cannot carry this weight anymore. If I do, it will crush me. And then we get this complete 180. No longer, within a matter of verses, right? No longer is the psalmist talking about feeling isolated from God, feeling like God is punishing them. But that the very first word of this psalm is what? Did you remember? Happy. Happy. Happy are the ones whose sins are forgiven. And towards the end of this section, they talk about God not as someone who is punishing them, but as a shelter. A place where their vulnerability, the very thing that they were terrified of showing, is actually the thing that is harbored and kept safe because they are and always have been beloved. By the act of bringing their shame to speech, to saying the quiet part out loud, the thing that we are terrified to tell one another, it's actually through that act of vulnerability that we feel so much less alone. It's risky. But we sing every week, make me a sanctuary. Make me a sanctuary. So are we sanctuary for each other? The real version. right? Because it is in that act of being so for real right now that we find real sanctuary. Because it's so lonely without it. We feel isolated. We feel like God has God's hand against us. There is so much emotional truth in what this psalmist is saying. But it is almost as if by magic, in the act of bringing the secret into the world, out of their body, that there is this sense of God's provision and God's protectedness. And I want to say again, God's love for each of us is constant and unchanging. That has always been true about God. God does not abandon any of us. It is our ability to be vulnerable in that relationship and reach for that belovedness. All the things that we say about God are not always true, though they are our experience. The feeling of isolation is real. But God is waiting to be sanctuary. God is waiting to extend that belovedness that has always been available, and that is the miracle of this psalm. The psalmist was trying so hard to protect that thing, whatever that burden was. But in the act of letting it go is where they found actual sanctuary, protection, a sense of connection to be able to weather whatever storms they were going through personally. And there's something really cool about this particular psalm. It shows up in multiple psalms. There's this little phrase, Selah, Selah. It's a Hebrew word. And we're not entirely certain exactly what the music would have been like, but scholars surmise that it was sort of an interlude, right? That there was some kind of musical break that was happening. And where all of those musical breaks are happening in this psalm, is where we started. This place of disintegration and agony and fear and isolation. And an invitation to stop and rest and breathe. The act of bringing that pain to speech. Stop, rest, breathe. And then God is present. Stop. Rest. Breathe. So we are going to practice that. We're going to reread this psalm with this new lens on it. The very human and real sense of agony and coming back to God. Coming back to that sense of belovedness, that sense of connection, which has always been available to us. Because the psalmists, they use action words, or words that move us. While I kept silent. That's how that first section starts. Then I acknowledged. Therefore, I receive. So I'm going to read this psalm again and allow it to sink into our bones, perhaps become our prayer together today. To get in touch with our sense of loneliness, our sense of isolation, our sense that maybe God's hand is against us, that the universe has got it out for us today. To be with that very real pain. It sucks being in that spot. Breathe with that. Be present to it. Then, therefore, happy are those whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Happy are those to whom the Holy One imputes no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. While I kept silent, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of the summer. Selah. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not hide my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Holy One, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Selah. Therefore, let all who are faithful offer prayer to you. At a time of distress, the rush of mighty waters shall not reach them. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with glad cries of deliverance. Selah. Amen.